Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I'm your host, Lori Palau, and I'm super excited to talk about today's topic because I gotten a lot of feedback. We're going to be talking about estate planning, which a lot of times people might not think is a super exciting subject. But I don't know if you remember, if you're a longtime listener, several months ago, we had my girlfriend Gail on talking about preparing for aging parents and what the process was like for her after losing her dad and just not having certain things in place. And we had received a lot of feedback from our listeners on how valuable that information and content was. And people were saying that they were struggling with certain areas and they didn't even know to think about certain things until they were faced in it. And so I knew that as much as it's not as, glamorous or fun as some of our other topics that we talk about, this is something that's really important and we really need to shed light on it. So I began to look at people who I wanted to invite on my show to have this conversation. And I found the perfect person. So joining me today is Shakisha Morgan. And Shakisha is an advocate, an activist, an attorney, and she has over a decade of legal experience with people and communities helping individuals, families, and businesses create, protect, and transfer wealth through estate planning. She is currently the Maryland practice lead for the Griffin Firm, an estate planning company or organization. Timeout. What are estate planning firm? Is that what you're say? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a law firm. We do estate planning, probate,
Okay.
and business
Okay.
succession planning.
It's too many words for my mouth. So I'll say that again. She works for an estate planning firm that helps people with all aspects of estate planning. She's been featured at conferences, podcasts. She's a graduate of Stanford University and Georgetown Law. I mean, she is no joke. And she's constantly doing education seminars, helping people throughout the entire process. She's also the co-host of her own podcast called the Mary and Martha Podcast, where she encourages women to live empowered and impactful lives of faith, which I love. And on a personal note, she lives in Maryland. She's married and has a 9-month-old daughter. So she is a working mom. So we can talk about that as well. Without further ado, I'd love to bring Shakisha out to the show. Welcome, Shakisha.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm so excited to be here to talk about the not so sexy process of estate planning. But I hopefully with this conversation, when we talk about it, people will see that it's not as scary as people think it is, and that there are always options for families to be able to protect themselves, protect their loved ones, protect their stuff with proper planning.
I'm really actually excited for this conversation. I think again we're here we are coming off of a roller coaster year where people were faced with all kinds of unknowns, from job loss to unfortunately death and illness and all of these things that gave many of us like a wake-up call.
Yes.
On a lot of different areas. And as I mentioned at the top of the episode, we had done a couple of, sprinkle episodes talking on a top line basis, not from an expert perspective, but more from what was somebody's experience that didn't have the proper planning and what did that look like? So what I want to do is almost get ahead of the curve and talk to you today about, first of all, what is estate planning and where do people go depending on what season of their life they're in? So let's just kick it off by you telling our listeners a little bit about you and kind of your journey.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I did go to Stanford and Georgetown Law, but I like to kind of bring it back to who I really am, which is I'm the daughter of Jamican immigrants. I am one of 3 girls, the middle daughter to be exact. So shout out to all the middle children that are out there. We all are unique. I was born and raised in Prince George's County, Maryland. And so one of the things that happened when I was growing up is I saw in my community, I saw people We grew up in a middle-class community, so we saw people buying houses, we saw people raising their families. But Prince George's County was actually one of those counties that was hit really hard by the housing crisis. And we know that real estate is one of those things that people really use to kind of build wealth within their families. And so when Prince George's County was hit that hard, it really changed the trajectory of wealth for a lot of families. And so when I went to law school, I was thinking, I'm going to become a lawyer, I'm going to help people. And then I ended up becoming an insurance defense litigator. And if you think that estate planning is not sexy, I don't know how you're going to feel about insurance defense litigation. But I did that for a few years, and I realized that I just was not, I wasn't doing what I set out to do, which is to go out and help people. And so when I left that firm, I started doing some stuff related to racial justice. I was working for a think tank. I hung out my own shingle, which is the lawyer's way of saying I started my own law firm. And then I go to church with my current boss, and we happened to be talking after my godson's baptism. And she was just asking me what I was trying to do. And when I talked to her about the fact that I was hoping to help more families be proactive about passing on things to their own children, she was like, "Oh, okay, so you want to do estate planning?" And I was like, "Tell me more." And so we had a conversation about it, and I decided to work for her on a temporary basis. But 3 years later, here I am.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And so can you just explain to our listeners who maybe don't even know what that they've heard the term estate planning, but don't really know what it encompasses? Can you
Mhm.
break it down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people have heard about wills. They've heard about trusts because they think about trust fund babies. People who have unfortunately had to interact with the court system have heard of something called probate,
Mhm.
which is generally what happens when people aren't as properly prepared. When we think about estate planning prepares people to do one of two things. It prepares an individual and their family for the possibility that that individual becomes incapacitated. Because we know that when someone can no longer act on their own, we want to make sure that there are legal documents in place so that someone else that they trust can act on their behalf. The second thing that estate planning prepares for is for the eventual inevitable transition of every individual. And what it does is it ensures that the wishes of that individual as it relates to what happens to their body, to their stuff, to what we as estate planners like to call their legacy, is in line with what their wishes are. And so one of the things that we know is that when people pass and they don't have proper estate planning in place, it's literally like sending someone into the court system with to do like a scavenger hunt that has like no instructions whatsoever. So you don't know where to start, you don't know what to do, you don't know who to reach out to. So estate planning proactively on the front end gets you ready for it. We like to say that we take care of the legal side, and then you get to continue living life.
I love it. And so here's a question that I think some people might be thinking is, and I'm just going to kind of throw some stereotype scenarios out
Go
there.
ahead, do it.
I'm single.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not married. I don't have kids, or maybe I'm single or I'm married, but we don't have kids. I don't have a lot of money, so I don't have an estate per
Mm-hmm.
se. So what are like? Those are probably the two that jump out at me the most. Maybe
Yeah.
you could just speak to that. Like who is the right candidate to start doing estate planning? When do we do it? Like at what age?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to make a certain amount of money or own a home or all of those things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Lori, you brought up what most people approach me with. Well, one, I'm too young to be thinking about this sort of thing. Two, I don't really have any money to be thinking about this sort of thing. Three, I'm married, so I don't need to think about this sort of thing. Or I'm single, I don't need to think about this sort of thing. So people tend to think that the only people who need to do estate planning are married people with kids who have a lot of money.
Yep.
That
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be further from the truth. Because the truth is that estate planning, so the way that the law works is that when each of us becomes a legal adult, there are certain decisions that are our own that nobody else can have unless we've given them legal authority to do it. So when I tell people about why it's important to do estate planning, number one is I tell them that the very first beneficiary of your estate plan is yourself. Because estate planning is not just about money, but it's also about literally your life. So if you are 18 and let's say that you have a bank account with $20 in it, you still need an estate plan because at 18, you're the only one who can make your own legal decisions. So you're the only one who can go to a lawyer and say, I want to do this sort of lawsuit. You're the only one that can go to the IRS and say, hey, send my refund check here. You're the only one who can go to the bank and decide that you want to empty out the $20 in your bank account. You're the only one who can go to your doctor and say, I want this procedure or I don't want that procedure. So estate planning is not just about money, but it's literally about the person. So when we talk about estate planning in case of incapacity, right? Incapacity does not say, oh, this person has a net worth of lower than 100,000. So I'm not going to mess with this person's life, right? Incapacity is indiscriminate. So if something happens to you and you can't make legal decisions for yourself and you're 25, who can make them for you? You have to do estate planning. That's why we do powers of attorney. If you are in the hospital and you're 32 and they need to decide on who is going to consent to a procedure and you can't be the one that's consenting to the procedure, that's not about how much money you have. That's literally about your life. That's why we have powers of attorney. So that's why estate planning is more than money. And I also like to tell people, if you're single, you actually really do need estate planning because single people look out for themselves. They know where all the money is. They know which people to call when they need help. But if they are no longer able to take care of themselves, who can step in? They need to be proactive about that. I have heard terrible stories about people who have passed because there wasn't anyone that they were interacting with in a certain way. It was like weeks before someone found the body because there wasn't any. Estate planning, when I say we handle the legal and you handle life, people's lives operate differently when they do estate planning because the kind of conversations I have with my clients make them realize that they need to be proactive about certain matters that affect their life.
It's so interesting that you say this. First of all, I have a daughter who's 20.
Mm-hmm. So, congratulations.
Oh yeah, right. Well, it's Jesus took the wheel on both of my kids. Okay.
I'll be there 19 years and 2.5 months.
Oh my gosh. So so for me, I'm just thinking about her, right? As, she's independent, she's in college but I mean, God forbid, anything can happen at any point to any of us. And, what are her wishes for certain things? And I would think, and again, we could talk about this, like anything in life, your estate plan is going to change and grow as your life does.
Absolutely.
It's not static. It's going to be fluid. I mean, I know I could speak from, our experiences from when my husband and I got married and we got a will and, started, whether it was designating beneficiaries, who was going to have power of attorney if God forbid something happened. And that changed as we moved. It changed as our kids grew. It changed throughout our life cycle, depending on where we were and where they were. So I kind of feel like that's also an important thing to point out, that it's not like you're making this decision and it has to be final forever. You can modify, update it, change it.
Exactly. And you should, not even that you can't, you should do that. So, okay, I'll just use myself as an example. A year ago, I was not a mom. A year ago, I was on the road to momhood, but I was not a mom. 2 years ago, I wasn't even pregnant. 6 years ago, I wasn't even married, but I was still an adult who had bills, who had a car, who had a home that I was trying to take care of. And so, yes, life changes. And so what I tell people is your estate plan considers what your current life is, but it also considers what are the things that I anticipate coming down the line. that I can plan for right now. And then as my relationships grow, as my life circumstances change, then I'm keeping in contact with my estate planning attorney who can help me to make sure that my documents always reflect what my life looks like. I tell people that the estate planning relationship between an estate planning attorney and an estate planning client is different than any other legal relationship that you can think of, because people think that they had a best friend before they come and they sit down with me. I am the new best friend. I tell people in married couples, I'm the new third wheel because I have to know so much. We become so intimately knowledgeable about even each other, right? Because as I'm helping people develop estate plans that are great for them, I'm also telling them about things in my own life, right? So if somebody has kids, I'm like, well, here's what I did in my trust for my kids. So here's what you can think about for yourself, right? And I do those sort of things. We have those kind of conversations because, like you said, rightfully said, it's not static. It is complete. It's fluid. It's always changing with us because life is always changing.
And I feel like this is one of those topics that it's kind of probably like sex. Like some people, like their parents never talk about it, you know, and other people they
Absolutely.
do,
Yes.
or budgeting where it's something that you talk about or you don't. Like I think like I came into adulthood, and this is not like to throw my parents under the bus or anything, but like this was nothing that we ever talked about.
Yeah.
And I can't honestly say that I've ever really talked about our estate plan with my kids. They knew that um, in the event, God forbid, something happened, that they were going to be taken care of, and this is who
Mm-hmm.
they were going to go to. But we never really talked about like the why behind it, or that things were, this is why we're doing this, and this is the importance of it. So I think it just brings up a really good point that, or just, you know, really just an observation on my end, that this is something that, you know, when I look at like what encompasses an organized life in all different aspects, like
Yep.
this is just another sliver of the pie.
Absolutely. Yes. Because, okay, for sure, everything you said absolutely applies here. Because the other thing that I try to tell people is that when we talk about estate planning, in order for it to actually meet your needs, we're literally going to be looking at all aspects of your life. We're going to be talking about your finances, of course, but we're also going to be talking about your personal relationships. We're also going to be talking about your goals. We're also going to be talking about whether you anticipate being a nomad that's moving between different states, or whether you're in the stage of settling down. All of those things apply. And then as well, what you talked about as it relates to family is so important. Now, the first time I talked to my parents about estate planning was after I became an estate planning attorney, which is crazy. But the truth is that our parents weren't taught that it's not just about creating the legal documents, but it's also about creating the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the conversation, I mean, I got to tell you, I am just obviously a hit at parties when I'm like, hey, do you have your estate plan together? Have you talked to your kids about payable on death beneficiaries? Like, you know, I mean, really, everyone just invites me to the party. But in all seriousness, my parents, so my dad is a CPA. He was a CPA. And when they got married, they did their wills. I mean, this is now almost 40 years ago. And their 40-year-old will is what is still in place. Or what was still in place.
Right.
And then one of the things that I've had families come in. I had a single mom. She had 2 kids who were in college, and she did her estate plan with me, and we did like a trust plan and everything like that because she wanted to make sure if something happened to her, the kids didn't just get like a big bucket of money just dumped on them, which could overwhelm them and actually end up being a disadvantage because they weren't at the place where they could properly manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a part of the process, she brought her kids in to meet with us. And so we had a conversation even with the kids now. And I was saying, you guys are above 18. These are also things that you should be thinking about. It doesn't need to be as heavy. Like you're not 18 and you don't need a trust right now, but it is important for you to be thinking about powers of attorney. Because if something happens to you, would you want one of your parents to be able to step in and manage things on your behalf? If so, this is what we need to be doing. And having these conversations even younger, just like financial planning. The
Mm-hmm.
sooner have the conversation, the better it is for the entire family.
No, I couldn't agree more. We're going to take a quick break and then we come back. We're going to continue this conversation because, again, this is, I think, for so many people, they might be struggling with going, oh my gosh, I'm behind the eight ball. I don't have it. So if you're thinking that, just hang on because you're going to be fine. And we're going to talk all about it. Okay, Shakisha. So I'm sure there are people that are listening right now going, holy crap. However old, I don't have anything in place, or I just got some basic stuff, or whatever it is. You know, I filled out my 401k paperwork at work and I put my spouse or whoever as my beneficiary, and I thought I was good. What's the first step? Like, even to go about finding an estate planning attorney, like where do people go?
So that's a great question. So one of the things that I recommend to people is wherever you are located, whatever state that you're in, you want to find an estate planning attorney in that state because every state has its own unique rules. There are some general rules that apply across all states that I'll talk about, but there are some, little changes in the law depending on what state you're in. There's some community property states, some not community property states. So there's some considerations you want to have. So you want to make sure that you use an estate planning attorney in your state. A great way to start is by calling your local bar association. They tend to have lists of estate planning attorneys or any type of attorney that you need. And you can simply say, hey, I'm looking for this type of estate, this type of attorney. Can you give me a list of people to start with? Another way that could be great is, Lori, I'm sure you'll give people my contact information.
Oh,
There are
I
some
will.
states
Yes.
where I do have contacts in other states. So if you're in a particular state, like let's say you're in California or Georgia, or there's some other states, Texas, that kind of stuff. So I have sent people names so that they can talk to people in those states. But I want to start by saying, do not fear. Okay. The fact that you are listening to this podcast right now, the best time to start is right now. So right now you have the opportunity. So I would just say, go ahead and take that plunge. Go ahead and go do some research. If you want to know more information, I know that my firm, the Griffin Firm, we do free estate planning workshops. They're virtual, especially given the time we're in right now. But we do free estate planning workshops that give you like estate planning 101. And so you could tune into that workshop, and it will let you know that you're entering the process with a little more knowledge, right? You're not just coming from off the street, but you got a little more information about what estate planning is and where you can start. But if you have beneficiary designations, if you have life insurance, if you have 401k, even if you have your bank accounts, you want to make sure that there is a designee for all of your assets right now until you finish establishing your estate plan, a designee on all of your assets right now that when you pass, whenever that is, that who that goes to is who you've designated on that particular account. So that's something that you all can do today. Make sure your life insurance beneficiaries are there on current. I talked to someone who had his ex-wife that they had divorced like 30 years prior, and she was still the beneficiary on his life insurance because he forgot to go back and update it. So make sure your life insurance is updated. Make sure your retirement beneficiaries are updated. Make sure all of your bank accounts have payable on death designees. You can do that today.
Wow, that's so helpful. Thank you so much. And another thing is, and I would assume this to be true, but I just want to ask the expert.
Of course.
This would also hold for stuff as well. Like if you have jewelry or other things, like if I said I wanted this to go to my niece, this to go to my daughter, and this to go somewhere else, like those key like physical assets of things would also be included. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So one of the things that people are not really aware of is, what does it mean to have an estate? And people tend to think of estate like rich. No.
Yes.
In the eyes of the law, everything that you own at the time you pass is a part of your estate. The only question is what is the value of my estate. So two people who have bank accounts, one person's bank account has $20, one person's bank account has $20,000. Both of them have an estate. It's just that within that estate, the bank account for one person's is worth 20 and the estate for another person's is 20,000. But your estate includes your personal property. It includes, which is jewelry, clothes, handbags, shoes, your furnishings. It includes the artwork that you might have, no matter how much you think is worth it. Your cars, bank accounts, retirement, life insurance, everything that you own at the time you pass is considered to be a part of your estate. So when you write a will or when you do something like a trust, then you're going to address all of those things in that document.
Josh and I have stuff, and just hearing you talk about it, even though you're not making it scary, I'm like, oh my God, do we have all this stuff? Like I definitely like have those pangs of like panic and overwhelm. So I can only imagine people that don't have anything, or this is completely foreign, just could feel like a deer in headlights. And you're doing a great job. Like you're you're making it like super like simple and not scary, but just, I think because these are really big decisions that have lasting implications, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Like I think the greatest thing, and I even see this just with something as simple as organizing your closet, people just have a fear of making a mistake.
Yes.
They just don't want to make the wrong decision. So a lot of
Yes.
times we'll just not do anything because we're afraid, like, I'd rather do nothing than make a mistake.
And I totally get that. And anxiety is not something that I discount at all. But this is why I tell people to sit down with a professional, because a professional is going to make you feel better, not just about the process that you're undertaking, because they're holding your hand with you. You're not going down the road alone. You have a friend, but not just a friend, like a friend who's really smart and knows what they're talking about, to go down the road with you. But the other thing is that to remember that life will happen. And if there's anything any adult knows, is that avoiding life doesn't make it stop happening. Right?
That is for sure.
Better to put yourself in the position of preparation for whatever life may bring, right? And so I understand that it is something that people are afraid of. In fact, one of the top reasons that people don't do estate planning is because they think if they talk about death, it will bring death closer to their door. And all I have to say is that fear is just information. That's all it is. Fear just lets you know, hey, this is something that gives me the heebie-jeebies, but if I deal with it, then the fear goes away. So if I run from it, the fear just runs alongside me.
Yeah.
But if I go with the fear head on, do it afraid, but do it with a professional who's going to hold your hand and make sure that you feel comfortable about this thing that you're undertaking.
And thank you, first of all, for that. I think that's really comforting to hear, and finding that right person that is going to understand you and that you're going to trust and feel like this person has my best interest. And you may have to try different estate attorneys out to make sure that you find someone that you feel like, resonates with you. So, and I know we kind of touched on this, but just that for some people that are out there that are kind of like linear rule followers, is there like certain, like you should evaluate it every time obviously every time you have like a big life event, right? So that like a birth, a death, a marriage, a divorce, clearly, anytime that there's a big like life transition. What about like changing jobs when your kids become 18? Like, what are some other benchmarks that people can look out for of knowing, oh, maybe I need to make some updates?
Yeah. So let me take a step back, and for those who need, like, it's spelled out, let me tell you like what documents everybody needs.
All right, get your pens, people.
Yes, how often you should be addressing them.
Okay.
All right. In estate planning, we have something called foundational documents. They set the strong foundation for a good estate plan. They are the necessary documents that every person should have. So if you needed a checklist, here you go. Number one is a power of attorney for legal and financial affairs. It's called a durable power of attorney. It sets it up such that even if you become incapacitated or incompetent or disabled, it still allows someone to manage your legal and financial affairs. The second document is a healthcare power of attorney. This deals with your medical affairs. So that if somebody needs to be talking to the doctor, saying yes or no to certain procedures, saying yes or no to life support, that document addresses that particular issue. And then the third document is your will. It's called a last will and testament. For short, it's called a will. And this will says this is the person and names the person who will deal with your estate affairs, meaning anything that you own at the time you pass. But it also leaves instructions for them as to who gets what, and make sure that your wishes are honored in that way. Another document that people use sometimes is trusts. They're scary for people. They think that it's just for rich people, but trusts are just it's a different type of estate planning tool where it gives you more control over your estate, but also like the timeline. So for example, I am someone with a 9-month daughter. And so if I just did a will, that meant that when I pass, anything that I pass to her goes to her now. She's 9 months.
No.
She can't handle that.
No.
I remember when I was 18, I wouldn't be able to handle it then either. I remember when I was 25 and, whether or not I could handle it was a little iffy. When I hit the 30s, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I could manage things a little bit better now that I got a mortgage, I got a husband and a child, all that kind of stuff. So trusts really just give you more control and more flexibility over what it looks like to leave something for someone. It means you're leaving it in this vehicle until the time that someone would be able to manage what you've left them. So those are estate planning documents as a checklist to check it down. Now, when it comes to looking at these documents, updating these documents, at the very base, I tell everyone that the day you sign your documents, put that date in your phone and call it your planiversary, as in the anniversary of your estate plan, your planiversary, and put an alert every single year on that date and say, check my estate plan. And you just sit down, either with yourself or with your partner or with your family and say, does my estate plan still meet my current circumstances? Because, people will hit the lottery, they'll buy a new house and they'll forget to call me. I'm like, hey, you bought a new house and you didn't tell me? But now I feel like I'm saying it enough now. When people have a new kid, they call me. I get all these good news, from my clients. It's really wonderful. I love it. But also, if you do estate planning in the right way, then you also know that as life changes, you'll reach out to your estate planner. And so when you buy a new house, even if it's before the year, call your estate planner. You have a new baby, call your estate planner. You get divorced, congratulations, call your estate planner. Right? You get a new business, you close a business, you move to another state. All of those things are reasons to call your estate planner. Now, if you're changing jobs, maybe not, but if your benefits are changing, right? Like you're changing life insurance companies, you're changing your 401k, you're changing what your retirement might look like, call your estate planner. Your estate planner should be on your list. If you got an iPhone, you have a favorites list, put your estate planner at the bottom of your favorite list. Maybe don't put them above your parents or your kids, but put them close. Put them close on your favorites list.
I love it. And it's so simple. Again, like every time I'm like, duh, that's so, yes, to just every year, if you just do that, check in. And that doesn't mean to say that every year you have to make modifications. Right. Things might not have really changed much. Exactly. So it might be a few years. Like I think like we've gone like, 5, 6, whatever years, we've made a few changes over the 20 plus years that we've been married, but it's not like we are constantly updating our will.
Right. So there are a number of years that people go without updating their documents, but by training themselves to always check in, it means that if something did happen that past year, that doesn't go by without them making any updates.
My God, I love this. You're just so valuable. And I hope everybody's listening to this and it didn't just say, oh, estate planning and not listen, because this is so important. And just going back to what we talked about in our last episode that we did with my girlfriend Gail, is the amount of time and anxiety and overwhelm and red tape when this stuff isn't set up properly that people go through. And nobody wants to leave that burden for their loved ones, right? Nobody wants to leave a mess.
Exactly. That's why you got to remember your why. You're not just doing this to put words on a paper. Number one, like I said, the first beneficiary of your estate plan is you. Number one, you're doing this to protect yourself. Number two, you're doing this because you love someone and someone loves you. And so you know that if something happened to you, someone who loves you wants to step in and help. You want to give them the roadmap to help you.
I love it. I think that's like mic drop right there. I think that's a perfect place. Before we go to our last break, can you just let our listeners know the best place to connect up with you, find you, and don't forget to mention your own podcast as well. Not just about the estate planning, but also you have a podcast and all about supporting other podcasters. So let us know.
Yes. Okay. So if you want to connect with me as it relates to work, so I work for the Griffin Firm. So our website is your estateplanningattorney.com. Our phone number is 855-574-8481. I am also pretty active on Instagram. I share some estate planning tips. I share some helpful information. Sometimes I write articles in our bar journal. And so you can find me on Instagram. I tend to link posts there. My Instagram is my full name, Shakisha Morgan. And then I don't really tweet a lot, but if you're on Twitter, every now and then I try to keep up with it. I'm also Shakisha Morgan there on Twitter. Or it might be Shakisha Esquire. You know what? Instagram is really...
We'll just link it to Instagram. That's fine.
Stick with the Instagram. That's safe. But yeah, and if you want to email me, it's shakishaesquire@gmail.com. And if it's a work thing, then I'll forward you over to my work email. But if it's just some personal questions, or if you just want a recommendation for an estate planner in a particular area, feel free to email me at shakishaesquire@gmail.com. And it would be remiss if I did not shout out my own podcast. So for those of you who are people of faith, every week, every Thursday, I do a podcast with my co-host, Christina Jones, who is also another attorney. She's more of the advocacy side. She works with kids and truancy and all that kind of stuff, making sure our kids are awesome and taken care of and safe. And so we do a weekly podcast. This week, we're actually discussing a new book called We Over Me, Principles for Marital Partnership. That was just released. It's a really great book. And it was written by Erica St. Bernard, who is a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. So we do that, and we are the Mary and Martha podcast, and we're wherever you love to listen to podcasts.
I love it. And we will link up to all things Shakisha, personally and professionally. So if anybody is out there and you're walking the dog or, in the car, don't feel like you have to pull over and write all this stuff down. Just head on over to our podcast page and you'll be able to find everything. We are going to take one more break and then come back, and I'm just going to put you in the hot seat for our wrap-up questions.
I'm ready.
Sit tight. Okay, Shakisha, this has been such a enjoyable conversation, so important, and really, it's been eye-opening, even like I said, for me, who's somebody who thought I had, a pretty good handle on these things. So thank you so much. And I know that there's going to be people that are really going to get so much value out of this. So I always like to wrap up our show by asking our guests a couple questions. First thing we like to do is, since you're a source of inspiration, we always like to know what book or podcast has inspired you or been transformational in your life. So let's start there.
All right. So in terms of books, I don't want to be cliche, but I do love the Bible because
preach.
I don't know what I would do without that.
What's your favorite book in the Bible?
My favorite book in the Bible is Proverbs, as a general sort of book. But one of my favorite stories in the Bible is the story of Esther.
Okay, great.
So that's one of my favorite stories because it's always about courage and speaking up And I just think it's so important for women to feel courageous and to use their voice, and to not just work on behalf of yourself, but also on behalf of your community. So I love Esther's story. Some other books that I really love is The Timekeeper by Mitch Albom.
Such a good
I
book.
read that on the plane and sobbed. And so I was like, if a book can make me feel this way, it is the very first book I ever cried to. My seatmate was a little off put, but you know what? It's fine.
Happens. It
it's such a
happens.
good book. I love Mitch Albom. I love his style of writing. I love the imagery through his books, but The Timekeeper was such a life-changing book for me. And really just taught me the importance of really spending good quality time with those that I love. And then another book that I really loved was Present Over Perfect by Shauna.
Shauna DeQuest?
Yes.
It's my favorite
Yes.
book. It's my favorite
book. I love
book.
that book so much. I honestly, so I once I got through highlighting everything in the book, I then started telling my friends about it, and I wanted to share my book as like a, book share sort of thing. But I was like, I don't want any of you to forget to give me back my book. So I'm just going to order a book for each of you. And so in my mom circle, I sent everybody Present Over Perfect. I mean, all of us were talking about it for weeks. It's such a good book.
Such a good book. Oh my gosh.
So good.
We have so much in common. I love it. Okay. So then our other two wrap-up questions, and this could be as lighthearted or serious as you would like, is in this particular season of life, and you're a new mom,
Mm-hmm.
where do you feel that you are the most organized, and where do you feel like you're a bit of a hot mess?
Okay. So as you said, I'm a new mom. I feel most organized as my daughter's EA. I'm an excellent EA for my daughter. I am her top executive assistant. I make sure to be clear, like what bag she needs to go out. I make sure that her diaper bag is very organized. We've gone through a couple, but we finally reached a consensus on a good bag. So I am an amazing executive assistant to my 9-month-old daughter, Marley. She doesn't pay me, but that's okay. Not all quality jobs are paid for.
She's paying you in love. She's paying
That's
you.
it. That's it. No legal tender, but
No.
that's okay. That's okay. It's the most fulfilling job that I have. Um, and then the area that I feel a hot mess in is so funny. Last night I was looking at this and just felt so much shame. Post mom, the area I'm most hot messed in is my laundry.
Oh.
I just you just never have the time anymore to go through the full cycle, which is wash, dry, fold, and put away.
Put away. That's yeah.
So that fourth one, the put away, it just, so there's lots of folded and hung up clean clothes in my, closet area, but are they all in their rightful place? No.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I feel the most hot mess in. But my daughter's clothes are color coded.
Hey, that's small wins wherever we can. And honestly,
I'm doing the wins where I can.
And honestly, if your worst hot mess moment is not putting away your laundry, I think you're really doing pretty well.
I will take that, and I receive that, Lori.
Well, thank you, Shakisha. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on our show. For all of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, as always, just please click the subscribe button. If you feel so inclined to head on over to iTunes, leave us a review. That would be great as well. Connect up with us. We're all over social at Simply Be Organized, or if you're on Facebook, head on over to our Facebook group called This Organized Life Podcast, and post any other comments, questions, topic ideas. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much. And I'll be back next week with another episode. I'm Lori Palau. Peace out.